And now, the presentation of the Albert Shanker Award for Distinguished Service to this year's recipient, Jonathan Kozol. But first, a video about his life and work in his own words.
I was born in 1936 in Boston, right in the midst of the Depression. But I was very fortunate. I went to a wonderful progressive school, and I went on to Harvard and Oxford. I had planned to get a doctoral degree and teach Shakespeare, and I would have loved that life in a way, to spend my old age wearing a nice old tweed jacket. But I came back to the United States in 1964, and that spring changed my life forever. 3 young men went down to Mississippi to organize Black folks to vote. They were murdered by the police and the Ku Klux Klan. I drove into the Black community, and I went to a Black minister, and I just said, "Can I be of any use?" And he said, "Yes, young man, you can. You've had a privileged education. I'd like to see you share it with our children." So I became a 4th grade teacher in one of the segregated schools in Boston. It was worse than anything I could have imagined. Little kids engaged in the most minor misbehaviors, like one little boy in my class who whispered to himself. That little boy would be dragged down to the basement of the school and given a whipping. In that school, there wasn't anything at all written by a Black writer. So one day I read my students a poem by Langston Hughes. I swear you could have heard a pin drop. Those 4th graders were electrified. I was fired because the school system said Langston Hughes wrote in Black dialect. Death at an early age. That was the first time I wrote a serious book. Later, I wrote 3 books about the children of the South Bronx and The Shame of the Nation, about segregation in New York City schools. I don't write my books on the basis of statistics. I write them on the basis of my lived experience. I love the unexpected things that children say. I love the way they talk. That sort of stuff fills my books. They don't whip children in the Boston schools anymore. And Langston Hughes is standard curriculum. But I haven't really changed in my views. I still believe that school segregation is a terrible betrayal of American democracy. And I still agree with Dr. King that separate is inherently unequal. And it still is wildly unequal, as New York teachers know.
Jonathan Kozol touched the lives of so many, including many of our own members.
My senior year of high school, my AP literature teacher had us read a chapter from Jonathan Kozol's book on being a teacher, dealing with children who needed that one good teacher to reach out to them. I decided right then and there that no child should go through school the way I had, and every child deserves a teacher like Jonathan Kozol, and I was going to be that teacher.
I was given a copy of Savage Inequalities by Jonathan Kozol when I was in 11th grade. It was where I first read about the gross inequalities here in New York. I actually was planning to go to school to be a nutritionist when I read this book. I had applied to college and everything, but I read this book and I decided that what I wanted to do in the world was make a difference for kids in under-resourced schools.
This book really made me think about how we can actively participate in our communities to be not just teachers, but activists.
I use Jonathan Kozol's work to share with my students examples of structural inequalities and to illustrate for them real life and detailed examples that they can relate to.
Jonathan Kozol's death at an early age. It was both terrifying and deeply satisfying. When you were fired for doing the right things, it was good to know that there was somebody out there who would stick by their values.
I can't tell you how much I appreciate Jonathan Kozol's work. He has been with me along my own educational journey, side by side.
Thank you so much, Jonathan Kozol, for all that you have done to shine a light on inequality, and I hope that you continue to fight.
It is Kozol's work that has sustained my practice. Jonathan Kozol changed the lives of so many young people, and by extension through me and so many others, he has changed the lives of millions of young people, including me. If I could meet him in person, I would say thank you. Thank you for changing my life, and thank you for helping me change the lives of young people I have worked with. The world is a much better place because of you, Jonathan Kozol.
And now, some congratulatory remarks from the President of the American Federation of Teachers, Randi Weingarten.
Jonathan, you've been the canary in the coal mine, long calling out the pernicious effects on children of inequity, inequality, and austerity. Your accessible, heartfelt storytelling has been a pivotal vehicle for the public to understand the separate and unequal schooling students receive in America, and the oftentimes impossible situations in which educators are then placed. And you do that by weaving these beautiful stories and putting faces in front of the statistics and numbers that we so often can become numb to. Frankly, as foundation aid was becoming a reality in New York this year, as well as the funding that Joe Biden proposed as part of the American Rescue Plan, as that was passing through Congress, I thought of you often and how you've taught us persistence in our fighting and caring and showing up for our students and their teachers. But tragically, even as COVID has ripped the Band-Aid off all of this inequality, the lessons you have been trying to teach us are still left unlearned and unrealized in too many places. But know, as you continue to march on, as you continue to write, as you continue to teach us, you are an inspiration, our inspiration. I'm so grateful that NYSUT is honoring, acknowledging your extraordinary work, and so grateful that I can thank you so publicly. But with that thanks comes our continuing commitment to fight for what's right for our kids, particularly our most vulnerable. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you. And thank you, Jonathan Kozol, for your work and dedication to creating a public education system that works for all children. For over 5 decades, Jonathan has exposed the glaring inequalities in our educational system. Authoring numerous award-winning books on the topic, he has inspired and enlightened a multitude of educators and activists alike through his writing, his teaching, and his activism. The Albert Shanker Award for Distinguished Service, the highest honor bestowed by NYSUT, recognizes those who have made special contributions to public education in the United States. Albert Shanker led educators across New York State in a crusade for workplace dignity, and then led teachers nationwide into an era of educational reform and higher standards. Since its inception, this award has been bestowed only 18 times. Past recipients include education giants such as Hillary Clinton, Alan Lubin, Tom Hobart, and Kerry Kennedy. This year's recipient, Jonathan Kozol, has been a champion for children throughout a career spanning more than 5 decades. Throughout his career, he published over 15 works, many of which have become required reading for incoming teachers. His landmark work, Savage Inequalities, is as poignant today as it was when it was written in 1991. He continues to inspire, influence, and motivate educators, not just in New York State, but around the world. It is my great privilege to present the Albert Shanker Award this year to Jonathan Kozol.
Thank you, Andy. Thanks to Melinda Person, who did so much work to make it possible for me to be with you this evening. And special thanks to the indomitable president of the AFT, the one and only Randi Weingarten. But most of all, my thanks go to all those wonderful and devoted New York teachers who have been my friends for all these years and right up to the present day. I think they do the best thing there is to do in life, bring joy and justice to the hearts and minds of the children of America. I'm particularly grateful, I might add, to the teachers who have who bring me into their classrooms and sometimes let me teach a lesson, even at my grand old age. I always get a lot of happiness out of those wonderful teachers who are sufficiently informal to take the risk of letting me teach a little something to their students. Teachers don't get paid enough. They never did. They don't today. They don't receive the honor they deserve. And there's an awful lot of patronizing condescension from sort of tough-minded business leaders who are always using teachers as scapegoats for the sins of our society. But teachers have always been my heroines and heroes. And I just want to say that once again tonight. Teachers in New York, as all of us know, are facing formidable obstacles these days. An obsessive and unhealthy emphasis on testing and evaluating children solely by the numbers we can plaster on their foreheads. The testing may be abated briefly now in the wake of the pandemic, but corporate forces and benighted politicians haven't given up on that. They're going to demand it once again, I'm sure. I hope there's some way we can resist this. Other obstacles we face as teachers, a loss of money. I don't need to remind you of this, I guess, especially those of you who are teaching in New York City. Loss of money and scarce resources to the aggressive private groups that proselytize for charter schools. Extreme segregation that betrays the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King and all who worked beside him. A quiet reversion to the bad old days of Plessy versus Ferguson. We don't dare to say that, but the fact of the matter is that our politicians have ripped apart the legacy of Brown versus Board of Education. And we're back to Plessy once again. Our schools are obviously separate, but they're also wildly unequal. New York, as I'm sure you know better than I, is the most profoundly segregated and unequal state in the nation in terms of education. So if I have a parting message to my friends and allies in the public classrooms of New York, it's simply this: don't be silent on these issues. Speak and act politically without any inhibitions, and add your voices in every way you can to the cries for racial justice in this divided land. And don't let anyone tell you to be patient. I've been accused of being impatient now for more than 50 years. I always say, Kozol isn't sufficiently nuanced. I don't much like that word, to be honest. I don't think Dr. King was particularly nuanced. But they always say he's too urgent. He's impatient. In my belief, patience is no virtue when the precious lives of children are at stake. You only get to be a child once. And after these few years of childhood are gone, no one can ever give them back to you. So I'd like to end by thanking you again for all the love and ethical persistence that you bring into the classrooms every single day. Wonderful teachers, in my belief, do a great deal more than deliver testable proficiencies. I don't like those terms, as you can probably guess. But they do a great deal more than that. At their best, they are also warriors for justice in the front lines of democracy. In the face of all the obstacles and resistance you may face, I wish and pray for each and every one of you to someday know the taste of victory. Thank you for this award.